Imagine you are 26 years old. You've just achieved the absolute pinnacle of your profession.
Right.
You've totally broken the grip of the studio system. You've beaten Judy Garland for an Academy Award, and you are basically the undisputed queen of Hollywood.
Yeah, you're at the very top.
Exactly. And your very next career move is to just quit entirely. You pack your bags and you move into a European palace.
It's honestly one of the most striking pivots in modern history. I mean, you spend your entire early life building this massive legacy in one space.
Fighting tooth and nail for it, too.
Right, fighting for all this creative control only to voluntarily walk away from it to claim, a completely different kind of crown.
Well, welcome to a new deep dive. Today we're exploring the flesh and blood woman behind the myth of Grace Kelly.
Because we all know the glossy, iconic imagery, right?
Oh, for sure. If you close your eyes, you immediately picture the pristine white gloves, the icy Hitchcock thrillers, the famous Hermes bag, the ultimate fairy tale wedding.
But our mission today is to look past that manufactured surface. Because when you dig into the sources, the real story is far more complex than that simple Cinderella narrative we've all been sold.
Yeah, it really is a masterclass in fierce independence. We're talking about highly calculated career moves against these monopolistic power structures.
And the intense tension between personal ambition and public expectation. And ultimately, the heavy price of duty.
So we're going to unpack how she engineered that legendary career, the surprising realities of her royal life, and the tragic sudden end that just kind of froze her in time.
Right.
And to truly understand how Grace Kelly learned to navigate the sharks of 1950s Hollywood and later the rigid protocols of Monaco, we actually have to look at the crucible she was forged in.
Which is Philadelphia in 1929. And, the incredibly intense family she was born into.
Yeah, the Kelly family was an absolute powerhouse of ambition. Her father, Jack Kelly Sr., was the son of Irish immigrants, and he built this highly successful brickwork contracting company on the East Coast.
He was a self-made millionaire, basically.
Exactly. But on top of that, he was a 3-time Olympic gold medalist in sculling.
Wow.
He just possessed this relentless physical drive to conquer whatever he touched.
And her mother, Margaret Major, was just as formidable, honestly. She was of German noble descent and made history as the first woman to coach women's athletics at the University of Pennsylvania.
Which is huge for that time.
Oh, massive.
Yeah.
And then you add her uncle, George Kelly, who was a Pulitzer Prize-winning playwright.
Looking at these sources, I just kept thinking of the Kellys as a localized version of the Kennedys.
Oh, that's a perfect comparison.
Right. It's this hyper-competitive dynasty where Olympic gold and Pulitzers are just like the baseline for dinner table conversation.
Yeah, that kind of environment creates an atmosphere of almost suffocating high achievement. And what's really crucial to understand here is that Grace was not the golden child in her parents' eyes.
Wait, really? Given everything she achieved?
Yeah. Despite that immense pedigree, she wasn't the perfect academic star her father wanted. In 1947, she was actually rejected from Bennington College, specifically because of low math scores.
Huh. My theory on this is that when you're the outlier in a family of absolute titans, that rejection goes one of two ways.
Right.
It either breaks your confidence entirely or gives you this desperate, lifelong need to find an arena where you can be the sole architect of your own success.
And the sources strongly suggest the latter. She really needed a domain that her father hadn't already conquered. But when she decided to pursue acting, her father was openly disdainful.
He really didn't hold back, did he?
No, not at all. He famously stated that he viewed the acting profession as just and this is a, quote, slim cut above streetwalker.
Ouch.
Yeah. He offered zero support for her chosen path.
Which sets up this fascinating rebellion. She doesn't just fold. She leans into her Uncle George's influence to get an audition at the American Academy of Dramatic Arts, and she moves to New York.
But her father insists she live at the Barbizon Hotel for Women, right?
Yes, which was this absolute fortress of propriety for wealthy young women. But she completely subverts the whole thing. She pays her own way by modeling for bug spray and cigarette commercials.
I love that. She wasn't playing the demure society girl at all. She was actively carving out an identity totally separate from her father's brick empire.
And there is that incredible detail from the sources about her time at the Barbizon. She famously shocked the other residents by dancing down the hallways, topless, to Hawaiian music.
It's such a vivid image. It's this young woman just fully claiming her own space.
And that specific brand of independent, quiet rebellion translates directly into how she handled herself when she finally arrived in Hollywood.
Which was no small feat, by the way. I mean, the 1950s studio system was notorious for its total control. Studios essentially owned their actors.
Right, they dictated everything.
Exactly. What roles you took, who you dated, how you presented yourself in public. And her early acting steps didn't really give her the leverage to fight that system right away.
Because after a Broadway debut and a minor film role, her first major showcase was the 1952 Western High Noon alongside Gary Cooper.
But she doesn't exactly pop off the screen in that movie.
No, she really doesn't. Even Alfred Hitchcock, who would obviously later become her ultimate collaborator, he watched High Noon and dismissed her performance as rather mousy and lacking animation.
Yeah, mousy is a rough critique from Hitchcock. So how does she go from that to commanding the whole industry?
Well, the mechanism of her rise really activates with a 1953 film called Mogambo, directed by John Ford.
Oh, right. She starred alongside Clark Gable and Ava Gardner, and they shot on location in Africa.
And this was the turning point that earned her a Golden Globe and her first Academy Award nomination.
But it also highlights her absolute audacity, because she openly told a Hollywood columnist she only took the role for the free trip to Africa.
I couldn't believe reading that.
Right. She explicitly stated, if Mogambo had been made in Arizona, I wouldn't have done it.
But the real story here is what happened during the contract negotiations for that film.
Right, because MGM wanted to lock her down with a standard 7-year contract.
Yeah.
And for like 99% of young, unproven actors, a 7-year MGM contract was the ultimate lottery ticket.
You just sign it without even looking at the fine print.
Exactly. But she doesn't. She sits down with these ruthless studio executives and demands a clause allowing her time off every other year to work in the theater.
Which is wild.
And on top of that, she demands the right to live in New York City. She flat out refused to relocate to Los Angeles.
To put that in perspective for you listening, it's like sitting down at a high-stakes poker game where you are the only person at the table who doesn't actually need the prize money to survive.
Yeah, that gives you an incredibly dangerous kind of leverage.
Her family's wealth provided a safety net, but it was really her psychological detachment that gave her power. The executives were just completely baffled by a young actress who wasn't desperate for their approval.
And because they knew she genuinely had the ability to walk away, they caved. She secured an unprecedented level of independence.
And securing that independence meant she wasn't forced into generic studio filler. She was free to collaborate with directors who could look past the surface and weaponize her unique qualities.
Which brings us right back to Alfred Hitchcock.
Hitchcock realized that what he initially saw as mousy was actually this deeply controlled, icy elegance.
Right. And once he understood how to film her, they went on this legendary run. I mean, Dial M for Murder, To Catch a Thief, and Rear Window.
When I watched Rear Window recently, it struck me how Hitchcock introduces her almost like a dangerous, captivating force.
Oh, absolutely.
There is that famous sequence where she leans in to kiss James Stewart, and Hitchcock uses this slow, creeping silhouette that completely dominates the room. It feels so calculated.
Because it was entirely calculated. The character, Lisa Fremont, is a wealthy Manhattan socialite and this fiercely independent career woman.
And Hitchcock sculpted Grace Kelly's image through wardrobe and framing there, didn't he?
Yes, script specifically notes that Lisa never wore the same dress twice, and Hitchcock used that detail to constantly shift her presentation.
From glamorous evening gowns to a sheer negligee, down to just a casual pair of jeans.
Exactly. He didn't try to warm her up. He brought her innate, untouchable grace to the absolute foreground.
And it clearly resonated with her peers, too. Cary Grant, who worked with her in To Catch a Thief, was once asked to name his favorite actress.
Oh, I love this quote.
Yeah, he said, "With all due respect to dear Ingrid Bergman, I much preferred Grace. She had serenity."
But here's the paradox of Hollywood, right? Hitchcock perfected her image, but to win the ultimate industry prize, the Oscar, she had to completely shatter that glamorous mold.
Yes. Because the Academy rarely rewards pure glamour. They reward transformation. And that transformation was the 1954 film The Country Girl.
She played Georgie Elgin, who is the dowdy, long-suffering wife of a washed-up alcoholic singer.
She wore ordinary, unflattering cardigans. She completely stripped away that whole Hitchcock blonde aura.
But getting the green light to make that transformation was an absolute war. MGM didn't want her to do it because it was a Paramount picture. They wanted to keep their star property in-house.
And her response was to literally threaten to pack her bags and quit Hollywood permanently if they didn't grant the loan out.
Just flex that leverage again.
Totally. And once again, it worked. MGM relented, she made the film, and it won her the Academy Award for Best Actress.
Famously beating out Judy Garland in A Star is Born.
Winning that Oscar was the ultimate validation. It proved she was a serious artist, completely independent of her father's shadow and independent of studio control.
So by 1955, she has basically conquered her first world. She is Time magazine's girl in white gloves, she has an Oscar, and she literally holds the industry in the palm of her hand.
And then, as the head of the U.S. delegation at the Cannes Film Festival, she is placed directly in the path of her second world. She meets Prince Rainier III.
The sovereign of the Principality of Monaco. They met for a carefully orchestrated photo session at the prince's palace, and after a year-long courtship, they were married.
Now, I want to stop here and challenge the traditional narrative a bit.
Okay, let's do it.
For decades, the media has packaged this as the ultimate Cinderella story, right? The beautiful American actress swept off her feet by a European prince.
Sure, that's the fairy tale.
But when you look at what she had to give up, didn't she essentially trade the creative freedom she fought so fiercely to win for a gilded cage of royal protocol?
Well, it was really tempting to view it purely as a gilded cage, but we have to remember, she went into this with her eyes wide open.
You think so?
Yeah, the sources actually describe their courtship as involving a, quote, good deal of rational appraisal on both sides.
Ah, interesting.
Monaco needed a high-profile figure to boost tourism and investment, and she was stepping into a role with historic permanence. She wasn't tricked by a fairy tale. She made a highly strategic choice.
But the mechanism of that transition is just fascinating. Look at the wedding itself in 1956.
Right, the media overkill.
Exactly. The sources call it the first modern event to generate media overkill. It was watched by 30 million people on television.
But the dress she wore, the ultimate symbol of her new royal life, was actually designed by MGM's Helen Rose.
It took 36 studio dressmakers 6 weeks to build. It's this incredible paradox. She is leaving Hollywood to become actual royalty, but her royal debut is quite literally being costumed and manufactured by a movie studio.
It was a massive production. Over a 2-day civil and religious ceremony, she acquired 142 official titles.
Which is mind-boggling.
But the strategic choice she made came with a higher personal cost than she perhaps anticipated. By marrying Rainier, she had to permanently abandon her acting career.
And the reality of that cost becomes undeniable in 1962. Hitchcock reaches out again and offers her the lead role in his psychological thriller Marnie.
And she desperately wanted to do it. She was so eager to return to the screen.
But when the news broke, Monaco erupted, didn't it?
Completely. The citizens and the conservative establishment were outraged at the idea of their princess playing a psychologically troubled kleptomaniac on screen.
The pressure was immense, and she was forced to reject the project. And following that, Rainier basically dismissed any other attempts by directors to cast her.
That just has to be devastating. I mean, you have all this talent, you spent your youth fighting for agency, and suddenly the door is slammed shut by the very people you rule.
So how does someone with her drive process that kind of containment?
Well, you pivot, and you channel that energy elsewhere. She realized she couldn't act, but she could still influence.
So she threw herself into philanthropy.
Exactly, using her global profile as leverage. She founded Ahmad, a children's rights group that actually gained consultative status with UNICEF.
But perhaps her most telling cause, looking at the sources, was her advocacy for the La Lèche League.
Yeah, I found that detail really surprising.
Why was a European princess advocating for breastfeeding?
Because in the 1960s and 70s, the medical establishment heavily pushed formula. And royal women were traditionally expected to be kind of above the physical realities of motherhood.
So by speaking to thousands at conferences and publicly normalizing breastfeeding, she was actually being wildly progressive.
Yes, it was a subtle but profound continuation of her rebellious streak. She was asserting agency over her own body and using her platform to help other women do the same.
It shows she never lost that spark. And by the late 70s, she was actually finding quiet ways back into the arts.
She narrated documentaries, performed poetry readings.
And in 1979, she and her husband secretly worked on a 53-minute independent film together called Rearranged.
ABC TV executives were even interested in broadcasting it, provided they shot more footage. It really felt like she was finally entering a phase where she could blend her royal duties with her creative passions on her own terms.
But then the story just abruptly stops. We arrive at September 13th, 1982.
She was driving back to Monaco from her country home with her daughter, Princess Stephanie. They were in a 1972 Rover 3500 navigating the steep, winding roads of the Corniche.
And during the descent, Grace suffered a mild cerebral hemorrhage, a stroke.
Incapacitated, she loses control of the vehicle. It plunges 100 feet down the side of the mountain.
And she survives the initial impact, but suffers a second catastrophic hemorrhage at the hospital and passes away the next day at the age of 52.
It was a global shock. And because of who she was, myths and conspiracies instantly surrounded the crash.
Right. Didn't the Palace press office make a critical error initially?
Yeah, they issued a statement claiming the crash was caused by brake failure.
Which shifted the blame to the car, but the physical evidence proved otherwise, right?
Exactly. The Rover Car Company actually dispatched their own engineers from Britain to inspect the wreckage. They proved the brakes were fully functional and demanded a retraction from the Palace.
Yeah.
But the engineers did discover one vital detail about the mechanics of the crash. The Rover was equipped with a mountain gear position, which uses engine braking, specifically designed for those sharp gradients.
But Grace had kept the car in standard drive mode.
Right. Had she used the mountain gear, the car's descent would have been significantly slowed, even after the stroke. But fundamentally, it was the stroke that caused the tragedy.
It's just such a jarring, unresolved ending to a life that had been so meticulously planned. Her funeral drew massive crowds, including figures ranging from Princess Diana to her old co-star Cary Grant.
But her cultural footprint has never really faded. I mean, Prince Albert maintains her childhood home in Philadelphia as a historic landmark.
The costume design for Betty Draper in Mad Men was explicitly modeled on her aesthetic.
And even today, you see modern artists like Billie Eilish channeling her 1950s red carpet looks.
And of course, you cannot discuss her legacy without talking about the Hermes Kelly bag.
Oh, absolutely.
Which is my absolute favorite detail from the sources. Today, that bag is the ultimate status symbol. It represents effortless, unattainable luxury.
But the origin of why it bears her name is completely rooted in utility.
In 1956, shortly after her wedding, she was pregnant with her first child, Princess Caroline.
And the paparazzi culture was incredibly aggressive, right? They hounded her constantly.
So she began carrying a specific leather Hermes handbag, the sac à dépêche. But she wasn't using it as a fashion statement.
No, she held it directly in front of her to physically shield her pregnant belly from the camera lenses.
Those photographs circulated globally, the purse became iconic, and Hermes formally renamed it the Kelly bag.
So what does this all mean for you listening to this today? If you step back and look at the trajectory we've traced, Grace Kelly's life is really a masterclass in defining your own boundaries.
As a young actress, she refused to be a compliant pawn for the Hollywood studio monopolies. She demanded her own terms and won.
And later, when she transitioned into a royal, she refused to be reduced to a silent figurehead. Whether it was fighting for a role in The Country Girl or radically advocating for women's health, she consistently found a way to assert her agency within rigid systems.
If we pull that thread through to the Kelly bag, it leaves us with a fascinating observation about how we consume the lives of icons.
We perceive that bag as a symbol of glamorous excess. But for Grace Kelly herself, in the moment she made it famous, it was a highly practical tool.
It was a physical shield she deployed to enforce a boundary and protect her private life from a ravenous public.
It wasn't about fashion, it was about armor.
And that leaves us with a really provocative question for you to mull over. In your own life, what is something you do that looks like effortless grace or style to everyone else, but is actually a fiercely guarded boundary you've built to protect what matters most to you?
Because sometimes the pristine white gloves we wear aren't just for show.
Sometimes they are the only way we can handle a world that is constantly trying to pull us in every direction.